So in the end, the only way that they can actually make money is by committing crime. So if you see what I mean? I mean, you look at Saudi Arabian government. You know, the House of Saud is a corrupt government. It's carrying out wickedness. It's fighting on behalf of Israel. Do you know what I mean? So, and people who commit offences in that country, they get their own hands chopped.
See, what you have to appreciate, first of all, is this. There is a great misconception with what defines Sharia law.
Yeah.
Because there is no book on Sharia law.
It's interpretation.
It's an interpretation of the scholars in regards to certain things. Now, when it comes to chopping off the hands, first of all, it's not for a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
In fact, if the shop owner is requested to give the person the loaf of bread and they don't give it to him because he's hungry, the shop owner will be held responsible for his lack of charity than the person who's asked. That's the first thing. Secondly, it's incumbent upon the ruler to make sure that nobody is hungry in his society. So that will be an indictment on his leadership if that person is hungry. Now, the actual law is a certain weight of gold, and it amounts to about, if I remember rightly, around £200 worth of theft. So it is geared very much to the criminal who is a career criminal, rather than the one who does it through necessity. So he steals a little T-shirt to clothe himself, or he steals a loaf of bread to feed himself.
Of course,
that's fine. The Sharia does not
but to be greedy and steal for the purpose of greed is wrong.
If I mug somebody and steal their mobile phone, then I will, and I am arrested, and I'm taken to a court, and I'm found guilty, then I will be given my first warning. If I do it again, I will be given my second warning. If I do it a third time, then I will lose one hand.
What about the chances?
Now, when we look at Saudi Arabia, I'll give you an example. When I went to Dubai, I was sitting in the food hall in one of the shopping centres, and somebody had forgotten their very expensive mobile phone on the next table. So I said to my friend, isn't that person crazy? How can you forget such an expensive phone on the middle of the table like that and not see that you've left it there? 5 minutes later, a man comes with a tray of food and he moves the phone to one side and he sits there. And I said, brother, is that your phone? And he says, yes, I was reserving my table. Right? And I said to him, listen, I come from England, man, and we can't, there's no way we can do that in England. Weren't you scared that somebody was going to take your mobile phone? He said, no, brother, no, this is Dubai. Nobody touch here.
Yes.
Now, what I'm trying to say to you...
I know what you mean. I know you're saying about by the purpose of having fear, no one commits crimes.
And when we talk about innocence, when we talk about innocent and a person losing their hand, we have to also talk about all of the innocent people that person would have subdued and subjugated to often maybe quite a horrific, aggressive, offence in taking their possessions. Now, when you talk about some people who are burgled in their homes, some people, the psychological scars, they never get over it. They have to leave the house, they have to buy another house. So what about all of those innocent people that people never talk about? And they talk about the person who's lost his hand. Well, I say that it is better on the third attempt for aggravated burglary, robbery, when he exceeds a certain minimum amount, that he has the fear of that happening to him, because it may actually, because without the stick...
Have you noticed governments, though, do the same thing about 1,000 times worse?
Of
I mean,
course.
you get government, you look at what happens with America and Britain. They went into Iraq to steal the oil. They were rinsing the oil out.
They kill over 1 million people.
Exactly.
And then they talk about Sharia law chopping off one hand.
You see what I mean? They talk about someone nicking a loaf of bread and they never want to forget about it. You see what I mean? Like, it's a madness of these people.
Exactly. And that's where, if we're sensible, and we're honest, and we have an honest argument, an honest discussion, there are many sides, many facets to this discussion. But when we look at the overall picture, what we realise is that Islam sorts out many of the problems that society has today.
Well, I mean, I understand. No, I mean, the good thing about any kind of religion is it guides people the right way. It makes people much more humble and more understanding. Rather than someone who doesn't You know what I mean? Like someone who doesn't believe in God doesn't think that they can do anything they want.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
I have met many people who don't believe in a God. And have a very, very moralistic, very good moral life in terms of how they lead their lives. However, it's still a subjective reasoning that they've arrived at. It's not an ultimate truth that can't be challenged. So, for example, somebody else could say, well, if we're just born from a primeval soup and that we're just descendants of apes, then if I come into your house and take something that you own, what's the problem? It doesn't matter.
There's no such thing as good and
right.
evil.
There's no such thing as defining a precise nature of good and evil. Everything becomes subjective. And the humanist will always have this problem because they might say, oh, well, our morals have evolved over time, over history, etc., etc. But then we see many things that are happening in society that were regarded as immoral 20 or 30 years ago, but are completely moral today. And many things that are immoral today will become completely moral in 20 or 30 years' time. So therefore it's purely subjective. There's no anchor to fixate it to anything defined. You see my point?
See, I mean, the thing is, like with atheism, I mean, it's just like there is no guidance for atheism.
I think
it's to control your behaviour.
Allah says in the Quran that without guidance, you are compared to that person who's in the dark, just grappling blindly. In other words, whatever appeases you, whatever satisfies you, whatever you think is reasonable, you'll do it. You'll be grappling, and that's what we see in society today. Why is it that we have a society that is one of the richest societies in the world, having one of the highest suicide rates in the world? Much higher than the third world countries.
Well, it's very materialistic. It's very shallow. There's family breakdown. There's no, when you've got a lot of there's a breakdown in the religion here, like Christianity. There's actually falling. It used to be like a much more popular religion, and people would have morals, would have moral guidance, and there would be more family cohesion. And that's what's happening now. Is that that disintegration of religion, and then you've had a disintegration of the family, that breakdown.
Absolutely.
You can go to sleep with anyone you want.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. It's like,
none of the commandment is followed today.
Oh yes.
What I'd urge you to do is, inshallah, do read the Quran and do read the literature, and make up your mind on the evidence. And if you find that the evidence takes you to somewhere where maybe you're not comfortable, as long as it is the evidence, and as long as it guides you with its power, of its weight, of its truth, accept it. And if you think it's unacceptable because it doesn't have the evidence, then that's a matter between you and God. At least you've given it the intellectual respect that it deserves, where you've investigated it. That's what I say to people.
I stayed one time. I was in a Muslim hotel. Yusuf Islam. I stayed there for a while when he had a Brunswick Park. I was there for about 6-7 months. So I know
What can I ask you a question? What stops you from accepting Islam?
Because I mean the thing is, I do accept it. If anything, I've defended Muslims. I've seen them being persecuted, and I've seen them being stitched up and framed. I mean, I've looked, like 9/11, when I was at 9/11, you look at the anthrax attacks, same thing, they were stitched up in the frame. So you're angry. I see people, I think the biggest crime is when you see someone carrying out wickedness, framing someone else for it, so they look like a bad person. For me, that is, you see what I mean? I don't have to identify with the religion, to just say that is wrong, what he's doing. What is really happening. You see what I mean?
So you say, man, if you just
like when I see things like that, I think a lot of people have woken up to this, that Muslims have been framed, like what happened in 9/11. Very, very interesting subject. I speak about it all day long. People say conspiracy theory. When you look at the truth, it's like a weightless. It's like you really analyse it.
I think you should carry on reading the Quran to the end, and then the brothers are here. If you have any questions,
creator.
Go
We
along.
believe in all of the messages that were
Anything is
sent by
holding
God.
you.
So from Adam we
Any
accept
question you have, you will come here.
Noah and Jesus.
Hopefully, we can explain.
And we accept obviously the last prophet.
The best thing that can happen to you is finding God.
We accept the revelations that they've received. But as they
I'm interested in world politics and like that. That's why I really like to discuss like,
accept that the Quran, which is the last
that what is going on in the world. I mean, with regards to the speaking about whether the religion that way is right or wrong, it's not something I'm really that interested in because I know that Islam in itself speaks a lot of truth. You know, but it's not something that I've said, right, I'm going to belong to this group and say this is my religion. See what I mean?
But don't you think like why you here in this world, where you gonna go?
No, of course.
That's
No,
the basic question.
Shouldn't you find your creation before you go?
That's right. That's right. You'll be off. Like what I was saying earlier, you know, I believe in the baked beans.
Nice speaking to you.
And like, if, as I say, if at the end I think Islam is the best tasting baked beans, then I'll say okay. You know what I mean? Because you know what you're saying. You're obviously saying Islam is the baked beans, and that something else is just being stamped on it.
I'll tell you my own journey. And even though being born in this country, in South London, I was in my early teens, and I made a conscious decision that, you know, if I was going to follow Islam, I wasn't at least studying what other people had to say as well, and I was going to study Islam, including people who criticize Islam, as to what they say about Islam, and I was going to study what the rebuttals were for those arguments, and then only would I make a firm decision whether this was, in my view, the religion of God, as is claimed by the Muslims. And brother, what I found is the more I investigated, the deeper, alhamdulillah, my convictions and my faith became, but not because of any wishy-washy reasons of, oh, I felt the presence of God, or you know, I felt happy, or I saw the light in the corner of the room. Not for any of those reasons.
But
purely based upon...
You don't think that would make someone even go to Islam just by having all of a sudden overcoming
the thing is,
feeling of a spirit?
Well, because in Islam, we believe that Allah says that for men of understanding, there are indeed signs. Signs to discover, to recognize, to appreciate, to acknowledge God. And those signs are not just some flashy light from somewhere or something like that. It's reasoning through intellectual discourse and the analysis of the evidence. And if you find that the evidence is weighty and it's heavy, and it's compelling you to say, you know, this could not have come about from a man in a desert in the 6th century, then accept it. And if it doesn't do that, then that's your decision. At least you've made it through analytical and empirical analysis and reasoning. And of course, to some extent, I would argue and I would agree that the analysis will be somewhat subjective, but it will conform to the norms that you and I generally recognize that fall within the limits of general probability and reason and logic and rationale and possible limits. And if it goes way beyond those, then it's something extraordinary. And we have to then accept it as being something above.
At what point do you think someone could actually truly make up their mind before?
I'll tell you.
At what point?
For me, you know, this scripture, the Quran, which was claimed to be the book of God to Muhammad, I thought to myself, if that is true, it has to satisfy certain criteria.
Yeah. Because you could all of a sudden, just before you're about to die,
yes,
you know, you could say, oh yeah, all of a sudden I believe in Islam.
Yes. Well, Allah says...
You know what I mean? All that time you may have committed serious sins. You could have been a right sinner.
And that does happen to some people. However, Allah says that when the veils are lifted, in other words, where you see the angel of death come to take your soul, the doors of forgiveness are closed. And at that time, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that the person will say, please just hold it for 1 second, 1 more minute, so I can give more sadaqah. Sadaqah is a voluntary charity. And the person is then told that the doors of forgiveness, the doors of virtue and amal and everything are now closed. In other words, the test is over. The exam is finished. Now, up to that point.
At the point of when, yeah, when the angel of death is about to.
Right. So as soon as the veils are lifted,
yeah,
time is over.
right, okay.
Now, whatever you have done is all that can benefit you, or that will condemn you to punishment. Up until that point,
Where does it say this?
it's in the hadith. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his sayings.
Right, okay.
And we're told that up until that point, if a person accepts Islam, in other words, they say, what is Islam? Islam means peace. Peace through the submission of God. We all submit to something in life, whether we like it or we don't. We submit to certain constraints that nature places on us, or governments place on us, or the law, whatever. We all submit, whether we like it or we don't. Now, but we believe that the best of submission is to the will of Allah, to God. And if you submit to the will of God, you attain peace by following what God tells you to do.
I mean, could you imagine if a Muslim was working at a missile factory for the British or Israeli? That means he couldn't do it, could he?
Or any other factory, even if it's in a Muslim country. If I'm building missiles that are killing innocent people, even if it's in a Muslim country, that's wrong. I wouldn't do that. It's immoral. Even if a Muslim leader is doing something immoral, I can't aid and abet. I can't help it. You see, in the British Army, we even have some courageous people in the Air Force and in the Army who, through reasoning of Iraq and Afghanistan, decided not to fight. They said, I won't do this, I won't involve myself, because I don't believe the moral argument is justified for me to kill people there. And so they didn't go. That rule applies to us even as Muslims.
And not just, it wasn't just Muslims, there was some Christians.
And some non-Muslims, exactly. Non-religious ones. Now, so for me the convincing factor was that this Quran that is supposed to be from the book of God has to be free from contradictions. It has to have, if there's any prophecies in it, they have to come true. And those prophecies can't be vague. In other words, it could be viewed either way. They have to be quite precise.
What would you say about these Muslims that are fighting for Saudi Arabia and Israel in Syria? What would you say?
Well, in Islam,
if they are genuine Muslims.
In Islam, you can only fight for a cause that Allah judges to be just. Now, what does the Quran say? The Quran says, persecution is worse than slaughter. So slaughter until there is no more persecution. But it comes with a caveat. And the caveat is that even in a battlefield, you're not allowed to become the persecutor, the oppressor. So now if you manage to capture the opponents who are battling you, you have to feed them, clothe them, give them shelter, allow them to pray, give them the dignity as they deserve as a human being. You're not allowed to terrorize them and slaughter them.
You hear about these beheadings.
Right, which is not Islam.
No, exactly.
Nothing to do with Islam.
My point, and that's why I believe as well that it is extremists like Israeli special forces, who I know are operating as...
Could be, I mean, maybe.
Well, they
but
do it.
see, brother, so what convinced me was that this book that was claimed to be, Allah says in the Quran, without doubt. This is the book of Allah, and there's no doubt in it. And I'm thinking, hold on a second, that's a very bold claim to make, unless it is from God, right? But when you look through the Quran, and you look at the grammatical miracle of the Quran, in other words, at the time it was revealed, there were some 11 grammatical principles of how the Arabic language is constructed. Now, an illiterate goat herder in the 6th century comes with a linguistic Quran that the Arabs could not even copy, peace be upon him. They couldn't even imitate it. And that was one of the challenges of the Quran, that if you're truthful, provide one chapter like it, and if you can't, one verse like it. And if you can't, then fear the fire. And with the surety, Allah says, bring your witnesses to judge. Judge it for yourself whether you've accomplished it. It's a very bold challenge for a 6th century Arab to make.
Okay, it's very interesting. You've obviously got a very in-depth knowledge of the Islamic religion. But what is your view on
the Saudi Arabian royal family within the context of Islam? It's not an Islamic leadership. Because the will of the people, the way that the Amir or the leader is chosen, it's not somebody, first of all, who stands up for himself. A rich man can't put posters up everywhere and say, vote for me. I can't do that Islamically. The people themselves decide, so they say this particular doctor or this particular surgeon or this particular scholar is very articulate, he's very intelligent, he's very, let's say, very religious maybe, and so we would like him to lead us. And so they collectively choose an individual from each town, each city.
Who's this?
The group of the people themselves, the community.
In what country?
In any country. This is the Islamic way of democracy. Okay. So the group of people decide for themselves. Like in Iran, for example, right?
Which is quite a reasonable.
So the group of the people.
Theocratic government.
Well,
compared to Saudi, I'm comparing. Okay. I'm talking about. It's a lot more genuine.
Many of them have their issues. So
no, of course.
I don't want to. I'm certainly not going to claim that they are
compared to the Saudi Arabian.
Okay. And so the people themselves choose. And then all of the emirs of that particular town will choose one person who they wish to lead everyone. That's the form of Islamic democracy. If he doesn't do a good job, he's kicked out.
And where would you say that system operates the best then?
Well, it doesn't operate at the moment.
It doesn't?
No, but when we look back in history, at the Caliphate, at the rule of Abu Bakr, or the rule of Umar, radiallahu anha, peace be upon them, may Allah be pleased with them, or we look at Uthman, or we look at Ali, when we look at the Caliphs and how they ruled, right the way from China up to Spain, that was the Caliphate. That's how they ruled at that time. So it was the people who chose the Caliph, the one that, and if he didn't do a good job, he could lose his job because the people could vote him out. That's the form of democracy that Islam propagates. It's not democracy as we understand it, the definition of the word as we understand it.
So today, which would you say is the nearest to getting to that?
I would say, from my limited knowledge of politics, that there are probably no societies in the world today, countries, that operate purely on an Islamic leadership. And the reason for that is a multitude of reasons. Number one, I believe that Allah says, the Prophet Muhammad said, peace be upon him, that the leader will be like those who he leads. In other words, if you're a weak and crumbling people, don't expect a very steadfast leader. You'll have a weak and a crumbling leader as well. If you don't follow the religion, if you don't follow the ideals, if you don't become the most honest, the most decent, the most just, the most fair, the most charitable people in the world, don't expect to have the best leaders in the world. In other words, rectify yourself before you start pointing fingers. And the Prophet Muhammad kept saying this to the companions as well. Amongst the best of the things that you can do is rectify your own self. In other words, purify yourself of the wrongs and rectify yourself, and you will see change happening around you.
You don't think like a political ideology should run as well? Theocratic ideology. I thought theocratic ideology should be a socialist ideology, really.
What we have to appreciate is that when we look through history, at the time of the Prophet and shortly after, when those people did abide by the Quran, then did abide by what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, told them, we had relative peace. We had the observance of the poor being looked after. The roads being paved, there being libraries being developed, an education system being developed that was unequal.
And that obviously involved the violence that would be to invade countries where non-believers.
Okay. So for example,
infidels, you can say.
So for example, when the Persians were conquered, and they were told either accept Islam or we will basically conquer you. Many of the people of Persia, they welcomed the Muslims in because they knew under Muslim rule they would have rights again, that they weren't going to be the subdued, subjected, suppressed people. They would have a voice and they would have rights. Historically, when in Spain the Jews were living under the Muslims, the Jewish Chronicle is a Jewish newspaper. It reported that the Jews of Spain left with the Muslims to northern Africa when the Crusaders came in, because
I know they got booted out around Spain in the 13th,
right,
14th century, something like that.
Yes, right. Because under Muslim leadership, they had the protection of worship, not being forced to close their synagogues, and they were basically afforded the rights of the civilians of that time.
You see, of course, maybe then, but you look at now and you see like the way that I've noticed bad Muslims get. Yes, it's usually through the Jewish control and mainstream media. Because
a lot of it is.
The Jews do control. And this is not a.
Yes.
I don't believe in anti-Semitism.
Yes.
They're not Semites. Many of them aren't even Semites.
That's right.
Many of them ones that control the media.
Yes.
Are Ashkenazi, Khazar, or they're from other places in Europe.
Yes.
But as I say, they control most of the mainstream.
Yes.
And you hear so many lies told about the war on terror, demonizing of Islam. The brutal murder of his mother. But all the time.
I think what is evident is this. What is evident is that those who claim to be the bearers of news are not those who are giving us information impartially without bias. They've obviously got their editorial policies, and they conform to their editorial policies, and they recruit people within their, you can call it a business, right, who follow the same ideology and the same direction of their ethos, of their thinking. And so we get this news that is perpetuating this ill feeling. And when we look at 1.4 billion Muslims, if we were all terrorists, why wouldn't we all be doing these things that they're saying that we're supposed to be doing?
If someone bombed my country, you would be a terrorist.
Of course.
If you're going to invade someone's country, and
they're going to retaliate, aren't they? And sometimes they may retaliate in a way that we don't find legal or right or correct.
Well, the thing is, what is a terrorist? It's causing terror.
Exactly.
When you look at a lot of countries like Britain have caused a lot of terror around this world.
I would agree.
So
for me, going back to our argument, our discussion, which was that for me, the Quran, when I studied the Quran, it became a compelling argument that it's a grammatical miracle not to be reproduced, even be able to imitate or reproduce it for 14th century since it was revealed. We have preservation, like today we have 11 million people who've memorized the whole of the Quran, which is one of the miracles of the Quran, which Allah says in the Quran, we've made it easy for you to remember. So we have preservation.
Word for word.
Word for word. So in the month of Ramadan, when the Imam reads the Quran, when he's reciting the Quran in his prayer, if he even stretches one of the vowels, the people in the back, they correct him.
You can put him on mastermind.
That level of preservation, that level of preservation, we don't see with any of the other scriptures.
Right.
Then when we touch on the things that the Quran speaks about, it becomes very evident. There's a very good book. If you have time, you can download it for free.
Yes.
I downloaded it PDF.
Right.
It's an English guy who wrote this book about the Quran, basically. And it's some 300-page plus study of the grammatical aspects of the Quran, and you might find, hopefully you'll find it very interesting. I'm just reading through it, and I found it really, really interesting. But let me see if I can get it up here. It's called Discovering the Quran by, let me just go back. It's called Discovering the Quran by Discovering the Quran by Neil Robinson. And what it does, it actually goes through some of the things that I've spoken about, and it really does speak about it in some great detail. It's a very intense study of the subject, and it talks about like the grammatical miracle of the Quran. It talks about many other aspects of the Quran. And this guy, who was basically an English guy, he actually converted to Islam after his study. And so, I think, you know, some of the things...
Yes, it's interesting because Cat Stevens, you know, who was the user of Islam, he also converted. That's right. He converted at a time when he had a sign. That's right. When he was drowning.
That's right.
Yeah,
He said he was drowning.
Yeah.
No, but he didn't convert at that time.
Yeah.
What he actually said is that he says he felt he was going to drown.
Yeah.
He was going to lose his life.
Yeah.
And he said, if there is a God, save me and I'll find you. Right?
Oh yeah, that's right.
So at that point he didn't know.
And then
right. So there's a big wave that comes, it throws him onto the shore. He's basically saved. And then what happens is he then studies comparative religion. He converts to Islam.
Okay, well listen, it's nice.
It was nice meeting you as well. Yeah, nice.
Thank you, brother. Yep, I'm joining you all. This is the boat.
I just want to show you something, brother. 1 second.